So you have a very long history and perspective, and and how it changed California and what's really happened at the border. What do you believe from your perspective, you look at it historically and where we are right now, what things have worked? Obviously, we have no border security. We have completely broken immigration system where if you're here illegally, you get a lot of benefits and your judgment proof and a lot of welfare as it is very becoming problematic to really support our own citizens. But if you want to try to do something legal, it's almost impossible becoming to immigrate to our country with a long line and really very unreasonable and I would say very stupid immigration policy. But from the border security perspective, what have you seen work, what haven't worked? You work under a variety of administrations, Republicans, Democrats. What could you share with us that you think is important and where we are right now and what you think that an urgent needs that Congress needs to address?
Yes, and quite frankly, I don't feel that it's all that complicated. I feel that it's pretty reasonable. That we have a strong and secure border, that we're able to vet those who are coming and going, that we provide the opportunity for people to come into this country through the legal system in which we have had for years. There's laws in place that just need to be adhered to and obeyed. We find that the drug activity and transportation and trafficking of drugs, guns, human beings across the border is less. Will it completely eliminate it? No. That's just part of crime and criminal activity. But we will have a controllable handle on it if we enforce the laws that are currently in place, and that we get rid of the most egregious and felonious people causing harm to American citizens, holding them accountable. If you're bringing fentanyl into this country and people die, you need to be held accountable. If you're bringing human beings into this country and you are using them for a sex trade or gaining making money through criminal means by trafficking humans, you must be held accountable. I believe there should be federal laws that if you are trafficking young children for the purposes of sex trafficking or any other means, or any other human being for that matter, that there should be a federal law that you are held in federal prison for whatever determinate amount of time that is, so that a message is sent very clearly to those who are doing that. If you hold people accountable, if you enforce the laws that are in place, you will see a drastic reduction in the amount of people killed by fentanyl, the amount of cartels that are involved in coming across the border into our country, and you will actually have immigrants that are here, living peacefully, working in this country with the idea of chasing the American dream. I do not think it's complicated.
Thank you. I agree with you. And unfortunately, we haven't seen it, especially in the recent years. But if you would look at some things, what Congress is doing or doing, because really the most important power we have is power of the purse, right? We set up policies, we give direction, executive branch should, follow these directions, and funding is the way for us to, to actually hold the other branch accountable. And we haven't been doing our job very well, not just very well, it's terrible. I always say the only good thing that makes me optimistic that Congress has about 12% approval rating, so American people can see it. There is some hope. But from some of the things, what do you think are the most important things if we look at the fund, and maybe someday Congress will have a funding discussion. We haven't had it for a while. We just do CRs and presentations. What do you think, the most important things? Because we've heard some very tragic stories, the real consequences, real life affected, because of negligence and disregard of duty by executive branch. And what do you think things that Congress should maybe take a looking at the funding and other things that we try to force the other branch actually enforcing the laws?
I believe that law enforcement across this country should be supported, and the idea of defunding the police is one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever heard in my 38 years of law enforcement. We must support law enforcement at every level. Now, what that means is on the border, we need to spend money to make sure that we have a strong and secure border. But if you're asking me my opinion, and I'm only law enforcement, but common sense is something that I pride myself in. And I would argue that if infrastructure was put in place, that you had enough people along the border in regards to the judicial process, providing as many judges as you can, as well as possibly an incarceration facility to hold people in custody if they're coming across the border outside the means of the legal system. But you have enough resources at the border that you can actually keep it from becoming this funnel that everyone is so worried about and not being able to get into this country. But I think if you use the purse strings to help support resources along the border with infrastructure as well as people, I think that we would eliminate some of the issues that we, quite frankly, are facing in this country right now.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Sheriff Boudreaux, I want to say Tulare County must be very proud of you. You've, in two quick 2-minute speeches, you've about distilled this area more effectively than maybe anybody I've ever heard. I understand that you have a flight to catch and need to leave the committee within 5 minutes, so you're dismissed to leave at your discretion. Thank you, sir, for being here. And with that, I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, including the sheriff, but to Ms. Funder, Ms. Moran, Ms. Nungare, and Ms. Nobles. I've listened to your testimony, and our hearts are with you. It is a difficult task to discuss the loss of your children, and this committee appreciates your presence and recognizes how difficult it truly is. And as to Ms. Nungare, as the father of twin 12-year-old daughters, and my heart was especially touched by your testimony. Thank you. This Biden-Harris administration's failed immigration policy, the border crisis created by this administration, continues to harm communities across not just the southern border, but across the country. And having traveled to the border 3 different times, twice to Texas, once to Yuma, Arizona, we not only got to see the impact that it had on those communities, but how every community is impacted. We talked to farmers whose crops were invaded by illegals who were camping in the fields in Yuma. And if anybody's been to a convenience store in the middle of winter and turned over a ready-made salad and looked at the bottom, it says made in Yuma. So not only are you dealing with food supply issues, food price issues, but also farmer costs. And then we went to a hospital and saw a NICU, and the NICU directors talked about how many of their NICU beds are filled with migrants because it is a dangerous journey. Women are assaulted on the trip up, and they are often pregnant by the time they arrive at the border. They don't have prenatal care. They are often delivering prematurely and have to take up those NICU beds. If you are a citizen of the United States and you're in Yuma, Arizona, and you need a NICU bed, you're traveling to Phoenix, several hours away. Talking about the education system and the need for ESL teachers and the impact on the tax rates and the transportation and the housing costs. I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis, but also a crisis at the border, and it's also a crisis across the country in communities like mine, which is thousands of miles away in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But having been a prosecutor, I worked with a county who had an ICE agreement so that when illegals were arrested for committing crimes, they were tried, they were jailed, but the day they got out of jail, they didn't go walk the streets of Harrisonburg. They went and were taken by ICE to the airport, and they were sent back. And to any of you who would like to answer, why should everyday Americans care about the border crisis, even if they are thousands of miles away from the southwest border in places like Virginia? Ms. Aguirre?
I can tell you that all the people sitting here today didn't choose this path. Tragedy struck them without choice. Alexis had no idea that was going to be the last day she was going to have her daughter, alongside these other mothers. So whether or not you want to take notice of what's going on at the border, it might come knocking at your front door. Mr. Gonzalez, when he left to work that day, had no idea that was going to be the last moment he saw his daughter alive. The next time he was going to see her was at the medical examiner's office identifying her body. Right. So whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, the criminal element of the immigration population do not care.
Yeah.
They are going to afflict their criminal ways on our communities regardless. And not even mentioning any of the financial things that you just mentioned, which are important. My primary focus is the preservation of life, right? And quality of life. And I am just besides myself that we prioritize giving a complete stranger who has never contributed to our society a chance at the likelihood that they may or may not harm a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Or in my case, a little girl who's also a migrant.
And all you have to do, if you're in any part of the country and have a relationship with your law enforcement officers, go talk to them. Because as Sheriff Boudreaux said, even my sheriffs in rural Virginia can tell you when they pull over an unmarked van on the interstate highway and find sex trafficking, human trafficking, minors being abused, that is happening right in our backyard. And so we have a responsibility to protect the citizens of our districts, just as we do to ensure that you can be protected in your homes as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I thank the witnesses again. I yield back.